kind of silence that fills a room right before something breaks. That's what I remember most about that Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Bowery, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had already gone cold, staring at my phone screen. There was a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A 416 area code, Toronto. I almost didn't listen to it. I almost just deleted it and went back to getting ready for work. I'm glad I didn't, and I'm not glad I didn't. Both things are true. The voicemail was from a woman named Michelle, a loan officer at a branch of TD Bank I had never stepped foot in. Her voice was professionally calm in that way. That means the opposite of calm. She said there was an account opened in my name in October. She said there was a balance outstanding of $38,000. She said she needed me to call back at my earliest convenience. I sat there and listened to it 3 times. $38,000. My name. An account I had never opened. I set the phone down on the table very carefully, like it was something that might shatter. Then I picked it up again and called my mother-in-law. She answered on the second ring, which she always does, because she keeps her phone on the kitchen counter and she's always in the kitchen. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, and her voice was warm and easy the way it always was, and for a second I thought maybe I had misheard the voicemail. Maybe I had the wrong name. Maybe Michelle from TD had made some kind of mistake. "Did you know," I said, "that there's a loan in my name at a TD branch in Toronto?" There was a pause. Just a half second, just long enough. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. But she did. I knew she did from the pause, and I think some part of me had already known something was wrong for months. The way you know something is wrong before you have any real evidence, just a low hum in your chest that you keep telling yourself is anxiety. "My name is Ren. I'm 31 years old, and at the time of all this, I had been married to my husband Callum for 4 years. We met in university in Kingston. We got engaged the summer after we graduated, and we got married in a small ceremony in Callum's parents' backyard in Oakville. Their idea, not ours, but we agreed because it felt like the right thing to do at the time." That's a sentence I've said a lot in the last 2 years. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. Callum's family is close, tight in that way that can look like love from the outside, but functions more like a closed system. Everything that happens stays inside. Everything that comes from outside is viewed with a kind of low-grade suspicion. His mother, Diane, is the center of it. His younger brother, Bryce, lives 20 minutes from his parents and has dinner with them every Sunday. His older sister moved to Vancouver 8 years ago and is the only one who seems to breathe easily, though she never says so out loud. I grew up in Sudbury. My parents are quiet, practical people who taught me to pay my own bills and stay out of other people's financial business. When I married into Callum's family, I brought that framework with me, and I realize now that it was a mismatch I never fully understood until it was too late. Callum and I had joint accounts for household expenses, mortgage, groceries, utilities, but we also each kept personal accounts because that's what made sense to us, what felt fair. My personal savings account had been growing slowly and steadily since I started working as an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation clinic in Barrie 6 years ago. I was careful with money. I packed my lunches. I didn't spend on things I didn't need. What I didn't know, what I found out in pieces over the worst week of my life, was that my name had been used to co-sign a personal loan of $38,000 at a TD branch in Toronto 9 months earlier, on a Wednesday afternoon when I was at work. The signature on the loan documents was mine, except that I had never signed anything. My mother-in-law had a copy of my driver's license. She'd asked for it the previous year to add me to something at their cottage. Insurance, she said. I needed to be listed as a permitted driver. I handed it over without thinking. I trusted her. She was family. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. The loan had been used to buy a truck. Bryce's truck. The one he drove around Oakville looking pleased with himself. I found that out from the bank. Michelle, the loan officer, was careful and professional and genuinely kind. and she walked me through everything with the patience I didn't deserve because I kept having to ask her to repeat things. I wrote it all down on the back of an envelope because I couldn't find paper, loan amount, date, branch location, co-signatories. There were 2 names on the loan, mine, which I had never agreed to, and Callum's. I put down my pen. "Both names?" I asked. "Both names," Michelle said. I thanked her and told her I'd be in touch and hung up and sat very still for a long time. Callum was at work. He was a project manager at a construction firm in Barrie, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. I knew exactly where he was. I knew his schedule. I had thought I knew him. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because I think people expect the dramatic version, the explosion, the screaming, the cinematic confrontation. What I actually felt was a kind of grey flatness, like the color had drained out of everything and left the shape standing. The kitchen still looked like our kitchen. The coffee mug was still the one I'd bought at a market in Prince Edward County on our 2nd anniversary. The window still looked out onto the backyard where the snow was just starting to melt. I sat in that grey flatness for about 45 minutes. Then I called my clinic and told them I had a family emergency and wouldn't be in that day. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Pauline, and she worked out of an office on Dunlop Street, and she had a reputation for being very good and not particularly warm, which is exactly what I needed. I explained the situation to her in the most organized way I could manage. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me 3 questions. When was the loan originated? Was I present at any meeting with this bank branch? And did I have any documentation of my own signature from around that time period? And then she told me what I was looking at. What I was looking at was identity fraud. What I was looking at was a forged signature on a financial document. What I was looking at was a criminal offense under the Criminal Code of Canada. She said it clearly and without drama, the way you'd explain a weather forecast, and I found that more frightening than anything else she could have said. I asked her if it mattered that these were family members. She said no. She said the law doesn't have a category for that. I drove home and sat in the driveway for a few minutes. I had a voicemail from Diane, my mother-in-law, that had come in while I was at Pauline's office. I listened to it. She said she hoped I wasn't going to make a big deal out of this. She said Bryce had needed the truck for work, and they hadn't wanted to bother me with paperwork during a busy time. She said these things happen in families, and the important thing was to handle it quietly. I deleted the voicemail. I want to tell you what Callum said when he came home that evening because I've gone back to that conversation many times, turning it over, looking at it from different angles, trying to understand it. He came in through the side door at 5:20, same as always, dropped his keys on the hook, and called out that he'd pick up something for dinner if I texted him what I wanted. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same chair as that morning. The coffee mug was in the sink. He saw my face and went quiet. I know about the loan, I said. What happened to his face in that moment is something I won't describe in detail, because even now it's hard to look at directly. It wasn't surprise. That's the thing. It wasn't surprise. It was something else, a kind of collapse, like a structure losing its load-bearing wall. Ren, he said. Sit down, I said. He sat. I had written out a list of what I knew, point by point, on a piece of paper. I put it on the table between us. He looked at it. He didn't pick it up. He said he was sorry. He said it had been his mother's idea. He said Bryce had needed the truck urgently for a new contract and his own credit wasn't good enough and there hadn't been time to ask me properly and he planned to make the payments themselves so I'd never have to know. He said he should have told me. He said he knew it was wrong. He said he was sorry. I noticed that he did not say he hadn't known. He did not say he'd found out after the fact. He did not say he'd tried to stop it. He said he should have told me, which meant he had known, which meant he had chosen not to. How long? I asked. Since October, he said. which was 9 months, which was before Christmas, before our anniversary trip to Niagara-on-the-Lake, before every conversation we'd had about saving for a house renovation, a trip to Scotland we'd been talking about for years, maybe starting a family in a year or two. I got up and went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time. The next morning, I called Pauline again and told her I wanted to proceed. She said she'd expected my call. We talked through the process, filing a report with the OPP, notifying the bank, the documentation I'd need to gather. She was brisk and efficient, and I was grateful for it. I also called my credit bureau, both of them, because Pauline had asked me whether I'd checked, and I hadn't, because it hadn't occurred to me that there might be more. There was more. A second loan, smaller, $11,000, originated 4 months before the truck loan. A furniture purchase. Bryce had furnished his entire apartment on a line of credit opened in my name at a different bank in Mississauga. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Tim Hortons off Essa Road and looked at that number for a very long time. $49,000 total in my name. Payments I had never made. A credit score quietly dropping. A financial life I thought I understood eroding underneath me without my knowledge. While my mother-in-law called me sweetheart and passed me mashed potatoes at Sunday dinners and asked me how work was going. I am not a confrontational person by nature. I was raised to keep things contained, to handle things privately, to not make a scene. Every instinct I had was telling me to find a way to resolve this quietly, to let Diane make some kind of payment plan, to give Callum a chance to fix it, to keep it in the family the way families keep things. I did not do that. I drove to the OPP detachment on Ferndale Drive and I filed a report. The officer who took my statement was a woman in her 40s with short hair and reading glasses she kept taking on and off. She was thorough. She asked me to go through everything from the beginning, and I did, and she typed it all up, and she told me they would be in touch. I called my parents that evening. My mother answered. I told her everything, all of it, without editing it down to protect anyone's feelings. She was quiet through most of it, the way she gets quiet when she's thinking rather than reacting, and at the end she said, "Come home this weekend, Ren." I did. I drove up to Sudbury on Friday evening and sat in my parents' kitchen and ate my mother's pasta and felt, for the first time in a week, like I could breathe at a normal depth. Callum called twice that weekend. I didn't answer. He texted. I read the texts. They were apologies mostly. Some explanation. One message that asked me to think about what filing a police report would mean for his family. I read that one 3 times, and then I put the phone face down on the table and finished my coffee. Diane called once. I let it go to voicemail and did not listen to it. The thing I keep coming back to, when I think about all of this, is not the fraud itself, though that was real and serious and has taken a significant amount of time and legal work to begin resolving. What I keep coming back to is the Sunday dinners, the way she would ask me how work was going. The way she'd squeeze my shoulder when she walked past me in the kitchen. The way I'd felt, over 4 years, that I had been welcomed into something. That I was inside the circle. I was inside the circle the way a locked door is inside a house. Present, but not really part of anything. Bryce, when the OPP contacted him, had apparently been genuinely shocked that it had gone that far. From what I was told later, secondhand, he'd believed his mother when she said she'd handled it with my knowledge. He'd thought I'd agreed. I don't know what to do with that information exactly. I don't know if it makes it better or worse or just differently complicated. I've stopped trying to rank those things. Diane knew. That much became clear. The documents were specific, the process had been deliberate, and she had my identification from the previous year. She had planned this carefully. Whether she thought it would never come to light, or whether she thought I would simply absorb it quietly like so much else. I can't say. I've tried not to spend too much time guessing at what she thought. Callum and I separated in April. He moved into a short-term rental in Barrie. I stayed in the house, which was in both our names, and we began the process of figuring out what came next with the help of lawyers on both sides. That process is still ongoing, which is its own kind of exhausting, but it is moving. The fraud case is also still working its way through the system, which is the way these things go. Pauline has been clear with me about timelines, slower than I want, more complicated than I want, but moving. The bank has flagged the loans as disputed. My credit bureau reports have been annotated. It will take time to fully unwind. These things always do. What I have on the other side of all of this is something I didn't expect. I have a very small apartment on the east side of Barrie, second floor, with a window that looks out onto a maple tree that is, as of last week, just starting to go green. I have a standing desk I put together myself, badly, and it wobbles slightly, and I love it. I have my job, which I am good at, and which I come home from feeling like I've done something real. I have my parents, who drove down from Sudbury in February with a carload of things from my old bedroom, a lamp, some books, a blanket my grandmother knitted, and helped me set up the apartment without making a big deal of any of it. I have a credit score that is slowly, incrementally, month by month, being rebuilt from the outside of someone else's decisions. That part is not romantic or satisfying. It is just work. But it is my work, which is different. The truck is still Bryce's. He parks it in front of his apartment. I know this because a friend mentioned it in passing, not knowing the full story, and I held that information for a moment and then let it go. That was never really about the truck. It was about whether I was a person to them, or a resource. About whether being family, the kind of family they talked about like it was a fortress, extended to me, or whether I had always been standing just outside the wall. I know the answer to that now. I spent 4 years learning it gradually, in comfortable Sunday dinners and small sidesteps and reasonable explanations, and then I learned it all at once in a voicemail from Michelle at TD Bank at 7:45 on a Tuesday morning in March. I deleted Diane's voicemail without listening to it. I've thought about that a lot. Whether I should have listened, whether there was something in it that mattered, whether I owed her that. I don't think I owed her that. I picked up my phone and I called Pauline and I moved forward. That's the part that still feels most like me. There's a moment I keep coming back to, and it's not the dramatic one. It's not the voicemail from Michelle at TD, or sitting across from Callum at the kitchen table with that piece of paper between us. It's earlier than that. It's me, a year before any of this, handing Diane my driver's license in her kitchen in Oakville. Her saying it was for the cottage insurance, me not thinking twice about it. That moment. That's the one. I wasn't naive. I want to be clear about that because I think there's a version of this story where I'm just someone who wasn't paying attention, and that's not quite right. I trusted the people I was supposed to trust. That's different. But I also think, and this is the part that took me a long time to sit with honestly, I trusted without asking questions, because asking felt like it would imply I didn't trust, and I didn't want to imply that. So I smoothed things over before there was even a wrinkle. That habit cost me. What Diane did was wrong. What Callum did, knowing and staying silent through 9 months of Sunday dinners and anniversary weekends and conversations about our future, was a different kind of wrong, quieter and in some ways harder to metabolize. The law has a category for what Diane did. Identity fraud is identity fraud, whether the person whose name you forged is a stranger or a daughter-in-law you've known for 4 years. The law doesn't soften for family, and I've come to believe that's correct. But the thing that actually moved me forward wasn't the legal process, as necessary as it was. It was deciding, somewhere in that parking lot off Essa Road, that I was going to respond to this with my head as much as my gut. Because my gut wanted to call Diane back. My gut wanted to have the conversation she was clearly trying to avoid. My gut wanted an explanation that would somehow make sense of it, and none of that would have helped me. None of that was going to get $49,000 off my credit report. What helped me was Pauline, the OPP officer with the reading glasses, my mother who drove 4 hours from Sudbury without making a production of it, The act of writing things down in order, point by point, and then doing the next thing on the list. That's not a glamorous kind of strength. It doesn't look like anything from the outside, but it's real, and it held. I think about Ran a year ago sometimes, the one handing over her license without blinking, and I don't feel contempt for her. She was doing what felt like the right thing. She was trying to be the kind of person who trusts her family and doesn't make things complicated. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be that person. The problem was that she was extending that good faith to people who weren't operating in the same framework, people who looked at that trust and saw an opening. Knowing the difference between those two things, between people who share your values and people who are simply benefiting from yours. That's not cynicism. That's clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is something you build slowly, often from materials you'd rather not have had to work with. The maple tree outside my apartment window has leaves on it now. Full ones, not the tentative early April kind. I made coffee this morning in a mug I bought for myself at a market I went to alone. On a Saturday I had entirely to myself. It was an unremarkable morning by most measures. It felt like mine, completely. That's not nothing.